So how do you take the beloved Ritchey Venturemax alloy handlebars to the next level? That's right, you make them in carbon. In this video, get my take on these super awesome, super bling carbon VentureMax handlebars and find out what I think makes them stand out and if they're worth the significant price jump over their alloy counterparts. So I've been riding these carbon bars for a few weeks now, and right off the bat, I can say that they are indeed very comfortable. But before I jump straight into how they ride and whether I think they're worth it, let's take a quick look at the bars by the numbers. Now, probably one of the reasons these bars, alloy or carbon, are so popular is that they just seem to strike the right balance of measurements. Nothing too extreme in any given parameter, but just right almost everywhere. You have the shortish reach at 76 millimeters, a shallow-ish drop at 102 millimeters. Then the flare in the drops is also the perfect Goldilocks 24 degrees. Now, what I found personally is that anything less flared feels too much like a traditional road bar, and anything more flared makes it a little bit uncomfortable to ride in the hoods, and it can make accessing the controls a bit awkward. Now, there's also a mild flare out of 6 degrees, which is the amount that the drops are rotated outward, and also a mild back sweep of 4 degrees in the tops. Now, all combined, these dimensions just work in harmony to create a really comfortable, ergonomic handlebar. And I think a lot of cyclists have discovered the VentureMax and swear by it, myself included. And that's even with the unique, sometimes controversial, bio bend in the drops, which can take a bit of getting used to, but it's actually very comfortable. Now, of course, with any blingy carbon part, weight is going to be of interest. But I have to say that if weight is your only concern, then upgrading to the carbon bars might not be the best place to allocate your funds. The carbon VentureMax bars in 40 centimeters weigh in at a very light 228 grams. However, the alloy comp version in the same size comes in at 290 grams for a pretty modest savings of just over 60 grams with the carbon version. Now, to be clear, the carbon VentureMax bars are not just a carbon copy, are not just an exact replica of the alloy version. The carbon model features an Aero top section, which I know is going to light up the comments. Aero Gravel, right? Have I triggered some of you? Now, while I also don't buy into the whole Aero Gravel marketing thing, the flat portion is actually angled slightly upward, and it makes riding in the tops really comfortable, which, in my opinion, is more of a selling point than the somewhat questionable aero benefit. Also, the carbon version allows for internal cable routing, which, if you have the time and patience, makes for a really clean look, as the only section of cable exposed is from the exit holes on the underside of the bars to the down tube. And if you do run cables internally, then you can also go with the super clean, non-taped tops, which can look pretty cool if you're into it. The other difference between the alloy and carbon versions is that the shape of the bio bend is actually a bit different. On the carbon version, the hump is actually a little bit more abrupt than in the alloy version, which features a more gradual bio bend. It's kind of like the difference between one of those really long and low speed bumps versus the shorter, more squared off bumps. Now, comfort-wise, they both take a little bit of getting used to, but VentureMax owners in general seem to swear by the bio bend, as it does more evenly apply pressure to the natural contour of your hands while you're in the drops. Now, the one thing I did mention in my other review on the alloy VentureMax bars is that the bio bend does somewhat prescribe your hands to one location when you're in the drops. So if you're like me and you tend to like to slide your hands forward and backwards in the drops, depending on the terrain, then the bio bend isn't necessarily optimally comfortable unless you're sort of right in the middle of the drops. A minor thing, but worth mentioning. Okay, so how do these bars actually ride? Well, if you do buy a set of carbon handlebars, it's likely that you've heard of their superior vibration absorption characteristics. And these carbon VentureMax bars definitely do their job pretty well and damp out that high frequency, low amplitude vibration in much the same way a carbon frame set does. Now on my Diverge, I feel that the effects of the carbon bars may be a little bit masked by the FutureShock suspension system, which is designed to absorb that same high frequency chatter, but can absorb larger amplitudes by using its 20 millimeters of active suspension. Still, I can say that I definitely noticed a difference when switching from the alloy VentureMax to the carbon version on this bike. Now, perhaps where I noticed a bigger difference was when riding these bars on the Richie Outback. Now, the Outback has a classic headset design, and while it does feature a straight 1 1/8 steer tube, which affords a lot of front-end compliance, it can't absorb the bigger hits the same way the FutureShock can, simply due to its physical constraints. Now, because of this, the effects of the carbon VentureMax handlebars were actually much more pronounced on the Outback, and I would argue that you'd likely feel a similar difference on any other bike without some secondary suspension like the FutureShock or even a suspension fork. I will say though that it is a case of managing expectations and having a bit of perspective. If you buy these bars and expect a drastic change in the bike's ability to absorb energy and large amplitude vibrations, you might end up a little bit disappointed. Like how I'd be a little bit disappointed if you made it this far into the video and haven't hit the subscribe button. Which is not to say you won't notice a difference. I'm 100% certain that I could tell the difference between the alloy and carbon bars in a blind test, but I certainly don't expect the carbon bars to be able to absorb orders of magnitude more vibration than the alloy version. I mean, we're talking 40 to 46 centimeters of carbon tubing. It can only do so much. Now I know what you're thinking. If it can't dramatically change the feel of your bike and improve your bike's ability to soak up the chunk, then it's probably not worth it, right? I mean, the carbon VentureMax bars are essentially 7 times more expensive than the base comp alloy version. But I would be hesitant to jump to that conclusion too quickly. Sure, I mean, before Ritchey sent these bars over for review, I would have never dreamed of spending this much money on a set of handlebars. But after riding on them for a while now, man, they are just so nice. I'm now even considering upgrading to carbon bars on my other bikes as well, but we'll have to see about that. And I would also argue that there isn't just one huge motivator to upgrade to these carbon bars. It's more a combination of several little things that makes them appealing to me. I mean, the weight savings are pretty modest at just over 60 grams, but you also get the subtle yet undeniable ride feel of the carbon material. And you also get a nifty flattened section on the top, which again is angled just right, so it's actually very comfortable to ride. And if you're so inclined, you can go internal cable routing for a unique and arguably super clean look. And then of course, the pure bling factor of having a relatively unique part that looks awesome isn't nothing. To some, the aesthetic of a bike or a component is actually very valuable. And by the way, that's totally okay. I really feel that cyclists shouldn't need to defend their purchases by regurgitating data from laboratory experiments. I mean, come on, most cyclists who spring for, say, a blingy set of carbon wheels tell themselves it's for the weight reduction and aerodynamics, but, come on. They also look great, and that's totally fine. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that these VentureMax carbon bars are pretty cool, and they do offer some weight savings, and they certainly take the edge off that relentless chunk of gravel roads and poorly maintained streets. I would say that an upgrade like this probably isn't the first thing that I would do on a bike, but after wheels and tires and drivetrain are all dialed in, I'd say that a jump to a carbon bar is definitely a solid second or third tier upgrade. In any case, hopefully you found this review helpful. Now I totally understand that carbon bars are not for everyone, and they can be a pretty high-end upgrade, but for those looking to add a little bit more compliance and comfort, and of course some bling to their ride, a handlebar like these Ritchey Carbon VentureMax handlebars is definitely a good place to drop some spare cash. Anyways, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching, and thanks for subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.